The benefits of a high profile career network is inestimable, from access to information on trends and new development in your industry, which enhances your industry awareness, to access to career opportunities that are not widely advertised, right? If you've ever wondered how are people getting, securing job roles even before throwing in an application, it can be partly attributed to this. And, having a high profile career network lends you to exposure and visibility to your industry counterparts, which in turn gives you the opportunity to start to establish yourself as an authority in that space. And even Joseph in the Bible, when he was appointed as prime minister, his appointment can be attributed to many things, including the fact that he knew someone that resides in the king's court. So there's numerous benefits to having a network that is high profile and is highly value added. I'm Dr. Amaefuleesther, and today let's talk about how you can build a network that adds so much value to your career prospects. The first thing to note is birds of the same feather flock together, and I'm sure you've heard this saying a number of times, and literally means that individuals will more likely flock with those who look like them. So if you want to be found in the company of someone who is, or people who are, high profile and highly achieving, the question to ask yourself is, am I equally high profile and high achieving? Let's say you're working towards approaching a contact who can add value to your career prospects, and you become aware of their passions, their interests, and more importantly, the extent of achievement and prowess that they have. The question here is, can you equally demonstrate a similar passion and a similar interest, but more importantly, can you demonstrate the same extent of achievements and accomplishments as they do have? Because outside of morals and altruistic motives and people's commitment to being like Jesus by being humble, people would usually want to associate to a greater degree anyway with someone who can either match or exceed their value. So it might be a call to you to upskill and cultivate yourself to be the kind of person that you want to associate with. Now, the second tip is to learn how to demonstrate that you are a worthy contact. Now, it's one thing to be all of that, right? Be someone who is, high value adding, but it's another thing to be attracted by someone who is of the same nature. And the way to do that is to learn the art of communication and the art of selling and branding yourself and embedding your worth into conversations with a potential career contact. Then this is how I would usually go about it. So if you've identified an equally high profile individual that you plan on initiating a conversation with or engaging with, on being part of your career network, the first thing I would do is to do your homework on them, right? So on LinkedIn and Google is a very good place to start with this. And what you're looking for in this research is what I call common grounds. And common grounds are simply, their area of interests or their key projects or key initiative that they have been part of or been involved in, and that you can equally speak knowledgeably and confidently about, and have the opportunity to kind of brand yourself as an authority in that space. Not in a sort of braggadocious way or anything, but in a sort of tasteful and skillful way. And I'll give an example of how I've done this in a recent conversation I had with a potential person I really wanted as part of my network. As an example to illustrate this, I was facilitating a stakeholder workshop a couple of weeks ago, and this lady who was part of the workshop showed quite a breadth of knowledge and expertise in the subject area that we were discussing, and she really caught my attention. I was like, you know what, I need to know you because I need you to be part of my network. So I looked her up, but LinkedIn, Google was a really good way to do this. And then I discovered that her passion area was mental health, right? Which is a very, very, very important area, but it's really not my niche. My niche is perinatal health, but that's fine. So I emailed for a catch up. And then we had the meeting, and this was how the conversation went. So then we started off with the usual hello, how are you doing, how was your weekend, all the pleasantries and all the preambles, and we got that out of the way. And then I asked her, how long have you been working in the mental health space? And so she gives me an overview of her career trajectory, and then I add to the conversation saying that I know mental health is such an important area, and there's been an increased prevalence and us not really coming going back to normalcy since the pandemic. So there's that need that hasn't been met. And I know obviously there's challenges with the health system infrastructure to meet those needs. And there's this talk about moving towards instilling mentally resilient values in the population. So all of these things I'm saying is my way of telling her, you know what, I know a little bit of things, a little bit of stuff about your space, and I also have a shared interest with you. So I speak to that common ground that we both have as part of the conversation. So in response, the other party would ask, oh, how about you? What do you do? And she did ask the same thing. So this is the opportunity for you to sort of strategically start to move them into your realm, which is a place that you're more confident in and you can speak more confidently to. So she did ask this question. She was like, oh, what do you do? Like, what's your line of work? So I was like, oh, my own expertise is perinatal health, which is pregnancy, childbirth, and I did my PhD in that area. So that was intentional. I did a little bit of a name drop there to sort of signal that, hello, I am an expert in this area, and so a worthy contact. And I went on to say, I know there was a recent national inquiry that showed that mental health, particularly suicide and depression, as the leading cause of mortality in pregnant and postnatal women, and there was an increased risk in young women. I think twice in Asian women and 4 times in Black women. So I'm talking about perinatal health, talking about pregnancy, postnatal health, but I'm still keeping it within the area of mental health. So maintaining that common ground and that shared interest, so she stays engaged in the conversation. The chances are the person that you're talking to might already know what you're talking about, or they might not. In this case, she didn't know about this sort of national inquiry that I mentioned, and she seemed quite alarmed and quite interested, and even asked me to send the publication over, which I did. And one thing I've noticed is that people are always impressed when you tell them a bunch of important things they do not know, because it's a good way to start to establish yourself as a match for them. So someone who is equally knowledgeable and also can add value to them. And you also start to sort of signal, mutual dependency. So if someone knows you have something to offer them that they can't get for themselves, but they equally need something from you, they tend to stick around. So obviously the conversation went on, and we talked about a whole bunch of things, but that was an example of how you can, demonstrate your expertise and signal that you're a worthy contact in a conversation with a potential career network and someone who is, equally high profile and high value adding. So to briefly summarize that, if you're planning on having a conversation with a potential career network, couple of steps. When you start the conversation, give them the opportunity to sort of flaunt themselves, but that gives you an opportunity in turn to take a mental note of their interests, their passions, and their achievements, so you know what to speak to and what to demonstrate yourself as a match towards. When they do that, and when it's time for you to respond, sort of skillfully steer that conversation into a realm that you're an authority in, but still keeping it within the confines of a shared interest. And also name drop where you can, things that highlight your value. Do that, and then try and see where you can establish mutual dependency. A question one may have is, what if I'm not a match? What if I'm not as high profile as they are? And that's no problem. Speak to your strengths as confidently as you can, and be confident enough to make your intention of being a career buddy known. And from my experience, it's not what you say, but how you say a thing that makes the most impression. So be yourself and speak to your value as much as you can. So we've talked about the importance of being of the same feather as the birds you want to flock with, but also how to demonstrate yourself as a worthy contact in conversations of that kind. The third thing I want to add is be a nice person. Now, oftentimes people will relate to you based on your personality more so than the extent of your achievements or your accomplishments. So being a genuinely loving person is one of the greatest assets one can have. And I know that being loving is sometimes given like a weak or an unwise connotation, especially in the context of putting food on your table. But I still feel like love is, it remains man's greatest need and man's most powerful weapon. I mean, ask God. He saved the whole world through a singular weapon of love through Jesus Christ. 1 Corinthians chapter 13 verse 4 typifies what true love is, and in this case what being a good carrier contact entails. And that involves being patient, being kind, being respectful of other people's ideas and their opinions, not being envious of their achievements, not being proud or selfish or wanting to only further your own objectives, not being easily provoked, being easily forgiving and forbearing, tolerant of people's weaknesses, because friends and even career contacts inclusive are human beings and are likely to offend you, and repeatedly too. So being tolerant and being forbearing and forgiving are great character traits to have. So all of these characters I've mentioned, the traits I've mentioned, are so key to sustaining all kinds of relationships, even relationships with your career circle. The last pointer would be to nurture relationships. Now, network only remains a network and is sustained because it is nurtured. And this can be regular communications and engagement with your contacts. So I'm talking calls, texts, movies, birthday brunches, birthday drinks, jointly attending conferences and seminars, going for concerts, anything that keeps you guys both in sight and in mind, right? You have to be so intentional about nurturing your career relationships that you hunt for, and you calendar and commit to opportunities to do so. And nurturing relationships can also be by adding value. So don't be that connect that is always asking for things, that's always been on the receiving end but never given. So let your career contacts be beneficiaries of your value as much as you are of theirs. And lastly, there's also a place for vulnerability, I find. If you want sort of close-knit career relationships and connections that are based off on things that are beyond the surface level, you might have to open up a little bit and give room for sort of stronger bonds to be built. And it's been key to most of my career contacts and career relationships that has been sustained over time. So let's recap. How do you build a high profile career network? So number one, be the bird you want to flock with. So be equally value adding as the people you hope to attract, right? And the second thing is that people are not mind readers. If you're someone who is worth having in their corner, they need to know that. And the only way they can do so is by you communicating your value and your worth. And then the third thing is just be a very loving person, okay? If you've wondered what character traits are pivotal to sustaining long-lasting and mutually beneficial relationships, even between career colleagues, I'll recommend 1 Corinthians 13 verse 4. Last thing is nurture your networks, okay? And fan the flame of your relationships, and through regular contacts and through just giving consistent value. And if you're after something that's a little bit more long-standing, I happen to find that being vulnerable and giving room for your connection to be built on things beyond surface value is a very good way to do just that. So I'll leave it right here. Until next time, I'm Dr. Chiamaka Esther Amaefuleesther.